It is time again to check in on the attitude of farmers. Are farmers more willing to invest money into the growth of their operations, or is growth something that's not really even on the radar? And it's Wednesday. That means it's time for this week's Farmer Forum. We'll check in on what's happening in California and in another of the border states.
Live from the border to Hump Day via Farm Journal broadcast, this is AgriTalk. This morning we begin with Dr. Jim Mintert from Purdue University. Then it's a Wild West Farmer Forum with Joe Del Bosque and James Johnson. And directly following the news, Margie Eckelkamp from The Scoop. I'm handsome newsman Davis Michelson. Now, here's the host of AgriTalk, Chip Flory.
All right, Davis. Yeah, thanks, buddy. Joe Del Bosque from California and James Johnson from New Mexico. Mm-hmm. Both have been on the Farmer Forum in the past. It's been a long time since we've had James on, but it is his story of how he is changing over his operation of onions, of some other vegetables, and so on is quite remarkable, and looking forward to getting an update on what is happening. And then, of course, the fruit and produce production there at Joe Del Bosque's. Joe has kind of become the go-to for the news networks whenever they're talking about different weather conditions out in California. And so, of course, we're going to start with the weather out there, no doubt. How you doing, buddy? Everything good?
I'm doing great. Really good. Yeah, good. 45 degrees and sunny, speaking of the weather.
42 and sun is shining bright.
Boy, you get one more degree, you're going to have yourself a hatch on your hands, bro.
Yeah.
The midges will be out.
You are exactly right. You're exactly right. You know what? Hey, let's go ahead and get to that the Super Tuesday results real quick.
Oh, sure. Well, close to a third of the United States held nominating contests yesterday. Republicans voted in 15 states, while Democrats held primaries and caucuses in 15 states, which Biden won except for American Samoa. Trump appears to have won all of the states by significant margins except one, and that's Vermont, where Nikki Haley was victorious, Chip.
Yeah, and Nikki Haley this morning has made it official that she has suspended her candidacy for president.
All right.
So here we are. We're down to two. And this is where we ended up. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody, but at the same time, I think a lot of people are scratching their heads saying, how in the heck did we end up here with another Trump versus Biden contest?
Yep.
So, all right, what else you got in the news?
In other news, I've got the National Weather Service weather forecast. Isolated strong to severe thunderstorms could occur today across parts of the southern plains, with large hail and gusty winds possible. A coastal storm will bring heavy rainfall and the threat of isolated flash flooding across the mid-Atlantic and Northeast today. Gusty winds and dry conditions will continue the elevated threat for wildfires in the central and southern high plains today.
Yeah, and we are looking for some additional rain in the upper Midwest here before we get to the end of the week. So Who knows? We could get to an inch of rain this week.
Well, Chip, the House of Representatives today will vote on and very likely pass the first package of fiscal year 2024 spending measures. The House will likely issue their version of a farm bill after their Easter recess. The timeline gets murkier in the Senate, where positions by Ag Panel Chair Debbie Stabenow and other Democrats make funding and policy compromises nearly impossible to bridge. Asked about the farm bill's prospects, Texas A&M's Joe Outlaw had this to say.
I don't expect it to be done in 24 unless something wild happens after the election. And even then, if House or Senate flips, it's going to be enough change that I don't think it will happen early in 25 either.
Not even early in 25, according to Joe Outlaw, Chip.
Yeah, every time we get a timeline from Dr. Joe, it feels like he pushes it further and further down the path, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is poised to finalize its climate risk disclosure rule, but it arrives late in a landscape already transformed by California laws, EU regulations, and international sustainability standards board's rules. Many companies facing SEC reporting already contend with extensive requirements from these other sources. All three major stock indices finished with losses ahead of the first day of 2 days of congressional testimony by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, set for today and tomorrow. The Department of Ag Tuesday announced the finalization of inclusive competition and market integrity under the Packers and Stockyards Act. USDA says this will help producers and growers that have suffered from increasingly consolidated markets over the last 30 years. National Farmers Union President Rob LaRue noted, quote, today's announcement is the culmination of years of work from NFU and supporters of equitable livestock markets, close quote. Ethan Lane was also quoted as saying, this is great, but let's look out for the unintended consequences.
Right, absolutely. Whenever you turn over the, oversight to government, you've got to be aware of what the potential consequences might be. We're going to dig more into this one.
Yeah, we need to. Ukrainian drones attacked a Russian Navy patrol ship near the Kerch Bridge Monday evening and into Tuesday morning, allegedly sinking the 300-foot vessel. According to Ukrainian sources, about 24 Russian naval vessels have been damaged or destroyed by Ukraine since Moscow's invasion began 2 years ago. The European Union reportedly wants to shift into a war economy mode with greater cooperation to purchase and produce weapons. As currently drawn up, the plans involve some $1.6 billion in funding and chip. According to the Associated Press, a man who is trying to bring refrigerants across the border from Mexico has become the first person in the United States charged with illegally smuggling greenhouse gases. Don't we smuggle greenhouse gases every time we hold our breath, Chip? I mean, technically.
Technically, I believe you're right. I believe you're right. Good stuff, Davis. Thanks, buddy. Let's bring in Margie Eckelkamp, editor of The Scoop. Good morning, Margie.
Good morning, Chip.
Okay, weed control season feels like it's a moment away in the Midwest. What do producers need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think we should take a moment and think about our decisions this year and how every time we make a herbicide decision, it does have long-term implications. I had a recent conversation with Harlan Osmus. He's one of the co-owners of Osmus Farm Supply, a previous retailer of the year. And Harlan really illuminated the issue that we're experiencing around resistance. And how can we manage resistance in the moment of making our in-season herbicide decisions? Specifically, he talks about how we can't farm without the HPPD class of chemistry. However, there's 26 herbicides on the market today that include HPPD. So farmers should always be aware of what's on their label, especially as we have these triple packaged products in the herbicide as well as fungicide and insecticide markets. So really, you've got 3 different classes of chemistry in that jug going into your tank mix. So be aware of every label going into the tank mix, and then 3 big takeaways to help fight resistance this year. Number 1, farmers need to spray smaller weeds. Number 2, farmers should consider spraying when no weeds are present. And number 3, keep those pre-emerge rates at a maximum so you're fighting lower pressures post-emergence. So really thinking about what we can do today to pay upfront what we might experience down the line.
Yep. Those 3 things right there kind of, read and follow the label directions. That's what we're talking about in maximizing the effectiveness of that product. Margie, good stuff. Thank you.
For sure, Chip. Thank you.
You bet. Margie Eckelkamp, editor of The Scoop. We've got Jim Mintert up next here on AgriTalk.
I don't know what you're thinking. So call us at 855-4TALK-AG and tell us what's on your mind.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. Glad that you're with us on this Wednesday morning. I'm your host, Chip Flory. It's time for a conversation with Dr. Jim Mintert, the director of the Center for Commercial Agriculture and Purdue Ag Economist. Jim works with his counterpart there, Dr. Michael Langemeyer, and the CME group in putting together the monthly Ag Economy Barometer. Jim, it's good to talk with you again. How are you?
Good to be back with you, Chip.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's good to have the conversation again, Jim. So tell us, we're talking about the February results or the February survey, and the results of that survey. The overall rating seems to have inched higher, right?
Yeah, inched higher is a good way to put it. It rose 5 points compared to a month ago. I think maybe the more relevant comparison is when you compare it to a year ago, it was down 14 points. And if you look underneath to figure out, well, why did it go up a little bit this month? It was really all about people becoming a little bit more optimistic about the future. The future expectation index was up 7 points. However, it remains 6 points lower than it was a year ago.
Okay.
The current condition index, and this probably is no surprise, it was unchanged compared to last month, but when you compare it to a year ago, it's down 31 points. And I think that
31.
points to the idea that people expect 2024 to be a tougher year than 2023. And of course, that's consistent with our forecast as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so far proving to be pretty accurate is in the survey respondents are proving to be pretty accurate in this. The future expectations index, it's not a runaway to the upside, but it's been a grind to the upside in that future expectations. Why is that? Is it just the idea that, well, grain prices are probably getting close to a bottom?
That could be one explanation. And the other one, kind of in the background, we asked some people, in the survey, we didn't put it in the report this month, but we did ask people, do they expect to see a change following the election this fall?
Oh.
And a large majority of our respondents said they do expect to see some change following the election. So there could be some people looking that far ahead with respect to some change in policy that might impact agriculture. We're going to pursue that some more in some future surveys, so we'll see how that shakes out. But I think those are probably a couple of the explanations with respect to what's going on there. But, if you look at the Farm Financial Performance Index, again, people are telling us not much change compared to what they thought last month. But if you compare it to December, again, people expect things to be significantly weaker than when they thought last fall. Mm-hmm. And that, again, just points to the fact that 2024 is going to be a challenging year for just about everybody in the crop side.
Right. And they continue to look at the input costs, but the risk of lower prices for corn, soybeans, wheat across the board, it's having an impact on their attitude about their future expectations, right?
Yeah, because the question we've been asking for over a year now is looking ahead to next year, what are your biggest concerns for your farming operation? And as you point out, the number one choice is still high input costs. 34% picked that. But the big change is if you go back a year ago, only 18% of the people in the survey said lower crop and livestock prices was a big concern. This month, that's up to 28%. So you look at those two things and people are worried about a cost price squeeze, right? Yep. They know they're locking in some pretty high input cost, even though fertilizers come down, for example, but the other costs have not. So break-even prices are high, above prices being offered by futures market adjusted for basis. So people are worried about that cost price squeeze, and I think with good reason.
Yeah. Interest rates, a realization that interest rates are higher and that interest rate costs are a significant part of the cost of doing business. The realization has pretty well set in there, hasn't it?
It has. I mean, people are still worried about interest rates. But again, if you look at this month's response compared to a year ago, I think that's a good comparison. Last year at this time, that was all the talk about interest rates going up. And 24% of the people in the survey said that was one of their top concerns. This month, the talk is more along the lines of, have interest rates topped out? Perhaps they have. Some people obviously in the stock market talking about the possibility of rate cuts later in the year. So the percentage of people choosing that as a top concern dipped compared to last year down to 18%. And those are the top three concerns: high input cost, lower crop and livestock prices, and then followed by rising interest rates.
Okay. So as you connect all of the dots of what we've just talked about, and it starts to kind of draw a picture of what farm performance might look like in the year ahead, what kind of a picture is it drawing, Jim?
Well, the Farm Financial Performance Index is at 84. I think that's almost unchanged. It was down 1 point compared to last month. But again, if you go back to December, that rating was 97. So keep in mind what was taking place during the fall, the combination of really good yields. And during a chunk of the fall, we actually had some improvement in prices. By the time we took the December survey, we were starting to see prices weaken, but certainly not what happened here in the last 2 months. But you can see that change taking place. And then, when you look at the Farm Capital Investment Index, not much change compared to last month, down 1 point, 9 points below a year ago. And of course, you go all the way back to 3 years ago, that index was sitting at 88. So we're less than half what it was 3 years ago. And when you follow up and ask people who say it's a bad time to make large investments, why? Well, they talk about rising interest rates. They talk about the increase in prices for farm machinery and new construction. But I think one of the more striking things is last fall in October, for example, only 7% of the people in the survey that think it's a bad time to make big investments said it was because of uncertainty about profitability.
Yeah.
This month, that tripled. It's up to 22%. Again, that just points to this cost price squeeze concern that's out there. And I think, again, very, very valid concern.
Well, and the uncertainty about farm profitability, that's what creates deer in the headlight reactions. If you're just not certain about, and the thing is, I'm talking both ways here. If you're certain that things are going to be worse, you're going to take measures to manage that situation. If you are certain that things are going to be better, you're ready to take some action. When you don't know, that's when it gets really difficult to make the important decisions that need to be made, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And I think that relates also to the fact that we know there's a lot of grain in storage that's not been priced.
Yep.
And so you're right about the deer in the headlights thing, because I think some folks are sitting there thinking maybe it'll get better, right? Yep. And so you kind of come back to the old saw, which is hope is not a strategy.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Let's get to the February question. I think this is very interesting, talking about what are the farm operations plans for growth in the upcoming 5-year period. What did you learn from that question?
So this is a question we've been asking every year since we launched the survey. Every February we ask, what is a reasonable annual growth rate expectation you have for your farm over the next 5 years? And the results are pretty consistent from year to year. We don't see big bounces in the big changes. A large percentage of people say they have no plans to grow. This year it was 38% of the people in the survey. Last year it was 33%. 14% of the people in this year's survey said they have either plan to exit farming or retire in the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. That was 16% last year, so not a huge change there either. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you take the people who say they think they're going to grow at 5% or more, you're up at, 31% of the people in the survey this year. So it's really a bimodal distribution. You've got a group of people who are either slowing down, no plans to grow, plan to exit the industry. And on the other hand, you've got a group of people who actually plan to grow at a fairly rapid pace. And, one way to look at that is, well, a couple of ways. One is it points to ongoing consolidation in U.S. agriculture. That's a consistent trend that's been in place as long as we've got data. And then the other point is, when I look at this, sometimes people get concerned about, how will a young person get started in agriculture? And to me, this chart, when I look at it in chart format, it says there's opportunities out there. Mm-hmm. There's people who are looking for a solution. If you've got no plans to grow in the next 5 years, you might not be ready to retire in the next 5 years. But if you're not growing over time in this industry, you're on a glide path towards exiting, and maybe a glide path towards retirement. These are folks that are potentially looking for a way to solve a problem. And for a young person, that's an opportunity.
That's an opportunity. That's exactly right. I remember this conversation from this time last year, and it spurred a lot of conversations on AgriTalk about, hey, we need to identify those opportunities that are out there and take advantage of it. All right, Jim, good stuff, buddy. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next month.
right, thanks, Chip. Appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
You bet. Dr. Jim Mintert from Purdue University.
Time for Markets Now with the experts from Pro Farmer.
Joining us now, Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady. Steady to lower. Well, actually, I should call it steady mixed. In the corn market, we've got some modest losses in the bean market, and that doggone wheat trade is leading the way to the downside again. Brian, what's going on?
Yeah, disappointing trade in the wheat market, Chip. Double-digit losses across all three markets, with the winter wheat markets leading losses and posting new contract lows this morning. That comes in the face of supportive outside markets, sharp pressure on the U.S. dollar, crude oil market sharply higher, and so just a technical breakdown in the wheat market this morning. That's having somewhat of an influence on corn, though corn has come well off its session lows and at least trying to work to the upside. It briefly poked above unchanged a little bit earlier this morning and just couldn't find any sustained short covering interest.
Gotcha. What's going on in the soy complex? Because we've got a mixed bag in there right now.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of spreading. So soy oil is moving to the upside. Meal futures are trading to the downside. And as has been the case, mostly soybeans are following the meal market. And so we got losses of more than $3 in meal, and soybeans are down about 5 to 6 cents here at mid-morning.
All right. Very good. Take us over to the livestock trade. What are you seeing there?
Well, struggle to find buyer interest across the cattle and hog markets here at mid-morning, and I'd call moderate losses in live cattle futures. We've seen the seller interest start to build over the past 10, 15 minutes here. Sharp losses in feeder cattle, so that market continues to lead both to the downside and to the upside, and live cattle are kind of a follower at this point. And then the hog market, they continue to narrow up premiums at the futures hold to the cash index.
All right, Brian, good stuff. Thank you. That is Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady.
Opinions expressed on AgriTalk do not necessarily reflect the views of Farm Journal Broadcasting, affiliate stations, or sponsors. Our name says it all. AgriTalk. What more do you need to know?
Welcome back to AgriTalk. It is Wednesday. It is time for this week's Farmer Forum. We're going to get it started right now. Joe Del Bosque out in California. Joe, welcome back to AgriTalk. It is great to speak with you again. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing fine. It's great to be here again.
Good. Joe, we've been looking at the weather forecasts and weather reports coming out of California, and just you shake your head with everything that is happening in the state. What kind of an impact has that had on you this year?
Well, the weather has been closer to normal. Well, there's nothing normal in California, okay? I would say it's closer to average. You know, last year we had an extremely wet year, unprecedented snowpack and everything. And that helped us to carry over water to this year because a lot of that snowpack we saved in the reservoirs. This year we're about normal on precipitation and normal on snowpack. But we watch two weathers here, actually. We watch what falls on our farm, but we watch more closely the weather that falls up in the mountains in the snowpack and the runoff.
Yeah, and there is a fair amount of snow, right?
It's the snow just is barely a little bit above average right now, which is good. There's still a chance for more.
Yep. Is the state doing a better job of holding on to that water, or is it still letting too much of it get away from future use?
They did a little bit last year. I mean, there was so much runoff, and there were floods, and the state was under quite a bit of pressure from everybody in the state, you know, saying, hey, we've suffered through 2 years of drought, 3 years of drought, and here's all this water. What are you doing about it? So what they did is they allowed some water to go out to areas like farm areas and soak the ground and try to recharge the groundwater. So they started some of that last year, but they definitely need to do that more when we have the opportunities during very wet years.
Gotcha. All right. Well, stay right there, Joe. We've got a lot more to talk about yet. But I want to bring in James Johnson from New Mexico. James, it has been a long time since we've last talked. It's good to talk with you again. How are you?
Chip, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on this morning.
You bet. Glad that you are here. When I think about New Mexico, I just think about consistency in the weather. Is that the right thought pattern to have, James, or what have you guys been dealing with?
Well, this time of year, the only thing consistent is the wind blows almost every day. So that, generally we get these systems that come across us and produce wind and then hit somewhere mid-Texas to East Texas and really fire up with the thunderstorms. So they can thank us because I guess we're supplying them with the wind that produces their rains.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, James, what's on your to-do list at this time of the year? What are you getting ready for?
So we've, we're fairly diversified row crop, quite a bit of vegetables. We've got all of our onions in and planted and emerged now. Some of those onions we planted as early as last September and allow them to go dormant over the winter. Mm-hmm. And the current to-do list is we're about to fire up direct seeding paprika peppers as well as long green chili peppers. And we'll be planting Pima cotton and upland cotton here before we know it.
Yeah. Well, that's a market that has certainly changed here over the last couple of months, isn't it, that cotton trade?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The old crop cotton prices right now have skyrocketed, but we're not seeing as much movement in the new crop or the December futures as we'd like to see. So there's with corn and soybeans being off, though, we think that there's going to be a lot more cotton planted than probably was seen in the USDA or the National Cotton Council numbers that came out on the prospective plantings.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Joe, what about you? What's on the to-do list right now?
Well, we're going to start planting melons in about 3 weeks, and the ground is still a little wet. We're anxious to get on there and work the beds, and we have to pre-irrigate. So this all takes a little bit of time, so we can get the melons in the ground around the 25th of March.
Okay. All right. Guys, when we talk with Midwest growers about some of the challenges that they're facing, it's kind of the same list that we get from area to area, and I don't expect that so much in this case, but I'll start with you, Joe. What is on that list of challenges that you need to manage in this current crop season?
Well, whenever we have a wet year, it's been pretty wet here on the farm. I'm not talking about up in the mountains. And we have a lot of weed growth, and we sometimes get a lot of insects that come out of the wildlife areas to the west of us. Like last year, we had a lot of stink bugs come out of there that affect both our almonds and our melons. And so sometimes we get some of that come from those neighboring areas.
Okay. Well, and I know that you're, in the state of California, you're always dealing with different rules, different regulations that might not always be that business friendly. What about on the pesticide side of things? Have there been any changes in the state that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, most of the changes have been that we've been losing registration of some of our pesticides, and so they've been whittling down our list, and we've been getting new pests. Like there was one that kind of came up this last year, a beetle that is hurting almond growers in Australia, and we're not sure if we have the tools to manage that pest. Plus, we had a huge navel worm or navel orange worm impact last year in our almonds. So we're losing pesticides, and it takes about 5 years to get a new pesticide registered.
Yeah, and this, you're raising crops that if the insects get in there, you really don't have anything left to market, do you?
No, these go directly right to the crop. I mean, like the navel orange worm or this beetle called Percophilus beetle, I believe, it goes right into the nut. And once it eats the nut, that's gone.
Yeah. Jeepers, criminy. Okay. Yeah, we need to make it easier. What about you, James? You dealing with any issues like that on the regulatory side?
Yeah, New Mexico is king of waiting on California to decide something needs to be done, and they do it about a year later. So pretty much the same thing that Joe's talking about. If California has an idea, then New Mexico thinks it's good, and we follow a suit. I think the biggest challenges that we're going to have, and it's a challenge at all farm gates, is the cost of money is so great right now, and the outlook for profitability is pretty slim. And I don't like farming in a scenario where we're in the how do we lose the least amount of money. I mean, we've done this for long enough. I've got enough experience. I don't need to farm for experience. I need to farm to make a living.
I hear you, man. I hear you. You've been transitioning your farm, James. Tell us about that whole process going. Are you certified organic now? What's the status?
Well, we started working with a consulting company a few years ago called Advance and Eco Ag, and that was more about trying to get more regenerative and try to do a better job of managing soil health. And it was kind of interesting. 2020 was our first full year working with them. And that was actually June of 2020 was the last pesticide application or insecticide application that I had to use on my farm.
Wow.
And that gave us a little bit of an inkling that that there was a way that we could transition part of our farm to organics. So we're farming about 285 acres, or about roughly 10%, 12% of the whole farm now with an organic certification. And then after the 23 season, our farm is also regenerative certified now. So we're trying to exit a little bit out of the general commodity space and be a little bit more of a value added for some of these end consumers.
Regenerative certified. What crops are you looking to grow on those acres, James?
So we went ahead and certified the entire farm. So our onion crop is regen certified, but the biggest draw right now is in the cotton market. So it's funny because they set the bar and everybody needed to be sustainable. So we proved that we were sustainable. And then, we had to set ourselves a little bit aside. And so we've started working with a company called Regen Agri. We got a Regen Agri certification. And now we're also in Integrity Grown certified. And so we've got those two certifications that we're really pushing hard now in the textile industry, trying to get them to give us a little bit of a bonus on our cotton crop.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's from consumers looking for that, some kind of a label on a piece of cotton clothing that they're wearing, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And it also, it holds a little bit of weight also in the retail side on the onion crop. So we market to retail stores like Whole Foods, and a regenerative certification holds a lot of weight with Whole Foods.
Gotcha. All right. We are in the middle of a farmer forum with Joe Del Bosque from California, James Johnson from New Mexico. We've got to get to the labor issues, labor shortages, labor organizing. We need to get that. And then James has got a way that he is looking to get around some of those labor requirements, an innovative way of doing that. We're going to learn about that from James coming up here in just a minute. We'll be back with the Farmer Forum.
If the world is your oyster, we've got pearls of wisdom on AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk in the Farmer Forum. We're talking with Joe Del Bosque from California and James Johnson from New Mexico. Joe, labor issues come up every time that we talk, and you're in a labor-intensive segment of agriculture. What's your situation? Has labor issues improved over the last year? What's the situation?
It appears to be more stable now. A a lot of the, the Central Valley seems to be fairly stable. Over on the coastal valleys like Salinas Valley and Santa Maria, where they do a lot of vegetables, they're using a lot of H2A over there. Almost all of the large companies are doing H2A, which, they have to provide housing and transportation and so forth. So that seems like the only way that they can continue to produce over there. It is expensive, but they don't have enough labor there because the cost of living is so expensive over on the coast that farm workers can't afford to live there.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about is the labor, is it organizing at all?
It is. Last year, California legislature passed a law called the Majority Support Petition. That's the official name. We all know it as card check. It changes the way that unions organize. In the past, the unions would come to your farm and talk to your people. They had specific times they could talk to them. And when they felt they had enough support, they would call for an election, have an election like we held yesterday, secret ballot and all that. Yeah. That changed now to what they call a card check. They can take a card, go to your workers anywhere, on your job, in town, at their home, just have them sign it. And basically that's a vote. And and you can get organized, like that without the secret ballot.
Wow. And I would imagine that that creates some additional layers of complexity in getting this all in getting the job done. James, what about you? What are you doing to kind of take the pressure off your labor situations?
Well, our labor, we've got a little different labor situation, and it's specific to our farm. So, our south turn row is the border, and we butt right up to the new beautiful border wall here, and we're 12 miles away from a border crossing at Columbus, New Mexico. So about 80% of my workforce can commute across, and so they can live in Mexico with a lower cost of living. The only cost to them is the hour and a half wait to cross the border in the morning. But New Mexico's raised our minimum wage. We're nowhere near what maybe Washington, California are, but our minimum wage is quite high now. And really, we have a hard time getting people to work for minimum wage here. We've got a very vibrant mining industry in New Mexico and southeast Arizona, and then they don't have to commute very far to get over into the oil fields. So a lot of our young, healthy, strong men end up working in other industries. Yeah. So it's always an issue for us. Our workforce is aging, and because of that, we're trying some new technologies, trying to replace some labor with some pretty high-tech stuff.
Yeah, talk to me about that. And a lot of it comes in the weed control, right?
Yeah. So the caveat to when we started working with fertility and balance and fertility and having to reducing the need for insecticides, we still had a weed issue. And lo and behold, along came a company called Carbon Robotics, and they wanted to do some beta testing here on the farm several years ago with a robotic laser weeder. And at that time, that laser weeder, it was slated to be, or the original design was for it to be autonomous. And so we went through two different designs of autonomous robots, and we're now running successfully a commercial implement version of the laser weeder, focusing mostly on our organic program, but then also running it on about 60% of our conventional acres as well.
That's incredible. And if you're running it on that many acres, it must be working.
Yeah, so we've learned a lot about it. The company's learned a lot about assisting the grower in the implementation of this technology. The laser's really effective, it's a lot like running a cultivator or maybe even spraying herbicide. So it's way more effective the smaller the weed is, the less shoot time, and so that increases the speed of the laser weeder. And then it's incredible. We're in an amazing time of technology improvement, and they have improved the speed on this thing and the efficiency on this thing by 100% in a year with no change to the hardware. It was all in software improvements, and we're actually now beta testing a new speed control mechanism that's going to actually assist the operator, where the speed, it'll be an adaptive speed controller. And that's one of the things, because you have to slow down when you get into higher weed pressure areas of the field. And so we think that this is going to increase the efficiency again by 60 to 70%. So it is a fantastic time to have some of these new technologies.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that's the opportunity that you're looking at is something that you're going to have to grab in the year ahead to make your farm more efficient. James, great conversation today. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Good luck to you, buddy.
Thanks, Chip.
You bet. Joe, same to you. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
All right. That is Joe Del Bosque in California, James Johnson in New Mexico, taking some innovative paths toward solving some of the problems that they're dealing with on an annual basis out there. Thank you so much for listening this morning. Come back this afternoon. We are going to talk crop insurance evaluations, decision making with Jared Creed from JC Marketing right here on AgriTalk.